Mikhail Falkovich, you join us as Chief Information Security Officer for Consolidated Edison, one of the largest investor-owned energy companies in the United States. You've been deeply involved in information technology, reliability, and cybersecurity for many years, and you currently lead several collaborative efforts between government and utility sector partners on industry-wide security. Mikhail, what do you see as the core drivers, the contributing factors to our escalating cybersecurity challenge?
So I'll start out with the understanding that the threat landscape and just the attack surface that companies are dealing with and critical infrastructure is dealing with has changed drastically. The cost of entry for any malicious threat actor to attack and to actually do these malicious acts against companies is much lower than it used to be. And if you think about kind of a difference between a kinetic attack and a cyber attack, the cyber attack takes less time, less effort, and less cost. So for the general companies out there and even the critical infrastructure companies, right, this has become one of the highest risks that companies nowadays have to face. And so a defense in depth and defense in breadth program is a must-have to enable every organization to protect their assets, both from multiple layers of defense perspective and then multiple controls at each layer. Those are kind of the two terms that I use for that defense in depth and defense in breadth posture. And why is that a must, right? Our attack surface has changed significantly. We have more devices, more data in more places, right? More communications, and pretty much every company has now become a technology company, because if you're not utilizing technology, then you fall behind and you're not able to provide those required services that the customers expect, and that in the case of critical infrastructure, maintain and support that reliable service that other companies rely on, and the government as well.
So what are the actionable strategies to address this cybersecurity challenge?
So if I may just reference the NIST cybersecurity framework, right, you have to know what you're protecting. So you have to identify your assets, right? You have to apply the controls to protect those assets. Then you have to invest into the capabilities to detect, right, an incoming attack, then have the processes and the procedures to respond to those attacks, and then have the mechanisms to recover from those attacks. So if it's identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, those are the main towers of the NIST cybersecurity framework. And if you align with that, right, you're able to then get your resources in place in terms of people, process, and technology, right, to be able to deal with all of those threats that come every day.
Can we unpack that a bit? Get tactical in terms of specific actions?
Sure. So segmentation is crucial, right? Being able to have that layered defense approach where you have multiple layers depending on the risk of the assets that you're maintaining. And then I would say advanced analytics, right? So both inside my environment and outside of my environment, the ability to analyze the traffic or the behaviorals on the network and catching that anomaly is crucial, right? What is my baseline, and then what is the difference to the baseline, which we then evaluate and obviously respond to. I'm always chasing that anomaly, right? If I don't know what's normal, then I don't know what the anomaly is, and that kind of informs my risk posture and enables us to protect our assets. I would say that another focus is, right, so I focus a lot of on the preventative controls, right? But there's also the functions that happen after the bad thing has occurred, and then the incident response plans and the ability of the business to withstand any kind of a cyber event right? That relationship with the lines of business, not just from an instant responder, but from a business continuity perspective, has changed, right? So previously, maybe a business continuity conversation was, hey, my building is no longer available. Where do I go to perform my work? And now, because we're now all technology companies, right, it's a question of my systems are no longer available. How do I do my job, and how do I get working again quickly? So that business continuity function from a cyber perspective becomes more and more important when we deal with our business partners within the business, and also obviously within the supplier community and those that rely on us for our services.
What about the people side of the equation? Where do cybersecurity professionals fit in?
Each organization should have a pipeline of workforce, of people that are coming in. I'm very fortunate to work with a very diverse and dedicated team, and that team needs to continue to have fresh ideas and fresh thought coming in from the outside world, both from the universities and from other sectors as well, right? To be able to implement those technologies and ideas and processes to protect the organizations.
Mikhail, I know you strongly support external collaboration.
While companies are absolutely building up their own cybersecurity capabilities, it is imperative that we look at the defense as more than just one company, and work with the government and with our peers to create those circles of trust that give you that situational awareness, and also develop programs where we can have that collaborative defense and work together both on an analytic and on a mutual aid basis to help protect and recover from cyber threats.
Can you elaborate on these circles of trust?
We have these circles of trust where we do benchmarking, or where we collaborate both actually internally to the industry, also with the government, right? So those are once again different places where companies and CISOs meet, or even in some cases we have regular calls with the CSOCs, right, with the cybersecurity operations centers, where the situational awareness is maintained, and that collaboration continues. And so the ability to discuss what's happening, and to discuss best practices, and to discuss kind of what should I be doing next, right? That sharing of ideas is extremely valuable. And it's pretty interesting, because if you don't have that trust built up, and it takes a while to build that trust up, right? You wouldn't be able to call somebody like for another pair of eyes on an issue, right? And having those circles of trust enables you to have that greater situational awareness and be able to tackle larger problems that are within the industry or in the threat landscape overall.
Mikhail, what would you say are the key elements of these circles of trust?
So I'll mention a couple of parts. So the first one is NDAs, right? There are plenty of circles of trust where I know someone, but I don't have an NDA, and that's purely that personal connection. But to really get the best value of a circle of trust is to actually have that NDA in place, because then there is a legal kind of obligation and a structure to it, right? And in those most valuable circles of trust that we have, we do have those NDA protections, and we can talk freely about issues that matter in depth. Another thing that I will mention is that there is opportunity to create technological solutions for that collective defense. And I'll mention specifically CRISP, which is the Cybersecurity Risk Information Sharing Program, which is actually managed through the EISAC, and has a number of participants within the electric sector, where there are sensors that actually look at metadata on my network, and then that information gets analyzed and collected, and then specific reports get sent out, and that's a huge benefit. And once again, that not only a collaboration within the energy sector, but also with the government as well. So that that collaboration has been a tremendous benefit.
Much of what we've discussed so far has focused on business-to-business collaboration. Can you specifically talk about public-private collaboration?
So I'll talk briefly about a couple of programs. So first of all, right, being the electric sector, right, so we are at the base of critical infrastructure. So electricity drives a number of other industries. And if you think about how we engage with the government, right? The government is also a customer to some extent, but we engage on both the local, state, and federal levels. And we do interface with the different agencies for information sharing, and in some instances for additional engagements, right? CISA has a number of programs, and DHS as well has a number of programs overall that critical infrastructure sectors can reach out to and collaborate on a number of functions. We also engage with the labs for different projects with regards to securing the electric grid, and just really have an open communication with our government partners with regards to information sharing, and by the way, it goes both ways, right? And we share information to them, right? So they are aware of what's going on in our environment, and then they also share information to us that is relevant to our defense posture and our actions. So without that capability, right, we would have less insight, less situational awareness, and less ability to protect ourselves as a sector.
Is there anything you'd look to improve upon in terms of public-private collaboration?
I think our collaboration is honestly very good. If you compare maybe sectors and just different other environments that I've seen. And I would say that what I'm always looking for is actionable intel, right? So as long as there is information that is shared that is timely and that is worthwhile, right, for me to, and actionable, right, that helps me. That helps me tremendously. And there's been a number of instances over the past a few years where that information was timely and actionable. I would say that the other part that is not typically thought of as partnership is regulation, right? So there are plenty of opportunities to have reasonable and actionable regulation that is effective at improving the posture of the industry. If the regulation becomes too burdensome, that may be difficult, but overall, good standards and good mandates are there to help protect.
Any other areas for government action?
I would say that there are other ways that the government can help, and it's not easy sometimes, right? So I'm always looking for that policy of deterrence, right? And with the cybersecurity world being very asymmetrical, right, where once again it's a very low cost of entry and potentially significant impact on the target, that policy of deterrence is not straightforward. So I'm always looking for a way to deter the bad guys from attacking us, right? And it's more to be done here, right? I think there's more action needed.
What role do you see for cybersecurity standards, both for your own operations and for the products and services that you purchase and rely upon?
It's not an easy conversation with regards to products and services standards. So within the industry, and you mentioned SIP standards, NERC SIP standards, those are specific to transmission, and there's some distribution entities as well, and those are mandated standards that we must comply with. So the compliance program is a must to maintain that function. I would say that with regards to the suppliers, it's different. The actual standards that we have currently apply to the asset owners, not to the supply chain vendors. Even when we talk about the supply chain standard that was just recently enacted, it is applicable to the owners. It's applicable to me to make sure that my company's program is meeting the requirements of the standard. But it does not necessarily apply to a vendor because the vendor is not within that jurisdiction. That being said, the industry is working towards standardizing on supply chain cybersecurity risks. So I'll mention that there's an organization called NATF that we've worked with to develop a common questionnaire and the criteria for vendors to provide a level of risk, right, and an understanding of what that risk is to an entity that is procuring a service or a product from that company. And once you have that common standard and understanding, so like the financial services has group SIG, right, as a questionnaire, and there's different questionnaires for different sectors. And we actually worked on this over the past few years to come up with that industry-specific questionnaire for the electric sector. And right now, a number of companies are now adopting that questionnaire as the basis of their program for vendor risk management from a cybersecurity perspective. So standards do not necessarily have to be government-based standards, right? If it makes sense, the industry will do this on their own. And the government's help is always welcome and desired to both help with the drafting of the standards and of helping set up those programs and setting up those collaborative environments, which happens quite often within the utility sector.
In your experience, are there any challenges in applying standards?
So, I mean, there's also SOC 2 reports, right, and other ways that we can assess vendors, right? There's also a number of companies out there that provide those assessment capabilities and also, even in some instances, provide like a score. Hey, here's a score of an advanced cybersecurity company. Here's a score of not an advanced company, right? The difficulty is that there are different ways to measure, right? And I don't know that there's a single measurement standard that is easily manageable and consistent, right, across industries and across services that companies provide. Because sometimes, right, you're measuring a product, sometimes you're measuring the service and the ability of the vendor to actually maintain your data, right? And then sometimes you're measuring the actual program of the vendor in general to see if they have good security practices. I would say that yes, right, a standardized approach to vendor cybersecurity programs is a wonderful thing. I just think it's not as easy to get to. And also, I'll say that different industries, different sectors have different needs. So once again, we have a mandatory supply chain cybersecurity standard that we have to meet, right? And so our questions within our questionnaire have both kind of that risk perspective and that compliance perspective. Other industries may be worried about other things, right? That have less to do maybe with OT and more to do with kind of IT and data security. And of course, data security is really, really critical to us as well.
All of these efforts require commitment of resources, including time and effort of staff, financial resources, etc. What do you see as the primary motivators, the rationale for investment in cybersecurity?
So as a private company, right, so operational capability is important with regards to critical infrastructure, right? There's concerns on a much bigger impact, right? So both from a loss of life and economic impact on a particular region. Reputational impact is also a significant consideration. And then I would say the customer, right? So we must protect our customer data and we must protect the services that we provide to the customer.
Mikhail, any closing thoughts?
We must adopt a policy that is greater than a single entity that's protecting their own assets. We must look at management of cybersecurity risks and threats as a collective body of companies, collaborative defense, circles of trust, right? Cyber mutual aid. Those are key to enable us to protect not only ourselves, but the country overall.